Hi, my name is Dama Venturas, and this is my role as a health educator for suicide prevention in adolescent and teen young girls. Why is suicide a problem? Suicide is the second leading cause of death among school-age youth. There is a high amount of suicide rates among young girls, particularly in their teens. In the United States, those rates are dramatically increasing. The population most impacted are girls between the ages of 10 and 14. This age group of girls has experienced the largest suicide rate increase, tripling over the last 15 years. Some social determinants and contributing factors to suicide are family history of suicide, previous suicidal behaviors, history of mental health disorders, cultural and religious beliefs, unwillingness to seek help because of the stigma attached to mental health, and family dynamics, having no support or feeling isolated. My role as a health educator. As an educator, we know that certain behaviors portrayed in our youth may be a call for attention. However, how do we know it's not more than just that? When dealing with suicide prevention, a health educator's goal is to help the at-risk population from committing any negative, life-impacting decisions or actions. As a health educator in the area of suicide prevention, my goal is to reduce youth suicide attempts and deaths in the United States by increasing protective factors. Following here are some of the protective factors that should be talked about and some of my program objectives. It's important that we break the taboo that suicide is something we shouldn't talk about. Educating school personnel, teachers, staff, and coaches on depressive behaviors amongst teens and what steps to follow is crucial to this program. Increasing school and community involvement and teaching children how to effectively combat depression by encouraging positive factors and accountability programs in schools and community is also very vital. And creating supportive environments in and out of schools that will help reduce suicidal behaviors among the youth. Increasing emotional well-being and social connectedness among all students, and increasing community resources for mental health centers, community centers, after-school programs, and development of suicide prevention campaigns in the United States. When looking at a socio-ecological model, it's important that we look at all the different levels: individual level, interpersonal level, organizational level, community level, and policy, and look at the different factors that contribute to those behaviors. So for example, in an individual level, we see race, ethnicity, gender, attitudes, behaviors, biological factors all influence behavior. Something that hinders that is if an individual does not know how to effectively express what they're feeling, they're going to have a harder time being able to ask for help. Something that can help that is if individuals are aware that schools and community offer these benefits and these services for them to get help. On an interpersonal level, we see friends, family, peers all influence behavior. Something that can hinder that is families' expectations or learned behavior in the home that can impact a young girl negatively if there isn't effective communication. Something that can help that is having a supportive family and having open communication with family and friends to create a safer environment for the young girls. On an organizational level, we see how schools and institutions like that affect our influence and our decision making. Something that can hinder that if schools and workplaces don't have adequate available mental health or family planning resources for young girls. Something that can definitely help if schools do have those resources available for students in suicide prevention. If they have handouts that they pass out so that students know what effective steps to take if they're dealing with depression. On a community level, we know that community and cultural norms can promote or reduce suicidal behaviors. Something that can hinder that if we have no community interaction or no access to proper mental health care in the community. Things that can definitely help that is if you have social centers or churches that promote a focal point for health-related interventions. On a policy level, it's important that national, state, and local policies can affect communities positively. The way to do that, of course, is to have proper funding and have these prevention programs available. Things that hurt is not having these intervention programs and a lack of suicide prevention education for teachers, staff, and school-age children. When we look at interventions, there's several interventions that have evidence-based interventions that have been successful. The first one we're going to look at is the SOS Signs of Suicide. This is a program that's a universal school-based depression awareness program. The goal of the program is to decrease suicide and suicide attempts by increasing student knowledge and adaptive attitudes about depression. An impact measure to evaluate that intervention is to see how the students fill out the questionnaires and if they're showing a change in thought and behavior. After the program implementation, then we know that that's been successful. The second program we're going to look at is the SMH program, which is a school mental health program, and it's something that's already developed in school settings. This helps collect qualitative data. It also is important to get the feedback from the school personnel on how the program is being implemented. And then an outcome measure to evaluate that will be the group and individual feedback we get from the students, as well as the evaluations we get from the mental health personnel. The third intervention that we are looking at is the Step Up Strategies and Tools Embrace Prevention and Upstream program. This is a social and emotional learning-based curriculum program for middle school students aimed at promoting possible mental health. One impact measure is if children demonstrate more social and emotional competencies in their school settings, then we know that we're creating a safe school climate that has brought that awareness of suicide prevention in the school. And of course, the feedback we get from the students will also be another way to measure. Evaluations. When we look at evaluations, it's important to know that evaluating a process or a program, it's not one step, but many. It's very important that if there are any problems within the program, that we must appropriately evaluate those programs and correct them. Also, it's important to consider factors to make sure that the evaluation process is complete. We need to ask whether the evaluation demonstrated any tangible benefits to the program. Was the program successful? Should the program be continued? And if so, for how long? Can the existing program be improved? Have there been any unexpected side effects to the program? It's my job to help assist with the evaluation efforts and make sure that the program is built to succeed. What are some of the outcome measures that we will use to evaluate the intervention? We discussed these briefly, but we'll go into a little bit more detail here. It's important that we get group and individual feedback from students. We also are going to get feedback from the questionnaires that were completed by the students. We're going to do those questionnaires before and then approximately 3 months after the program has been implemented. If students were exposed to the program and showed greater knowledge of depression and suicide practices, and they practice more adaptive attitudes towards these problems, then we know for sure that this intervention is successful in creating more awareness and positive behavioral change. And also the surveys. Surveys are going to also help us evaluate the program and look at the outcomes of the intervention. How do we know our proposed evaluations were successful? If children showed change in thought and behavior, that definitely shows that the program was successful in doing that. The feedback we get from the school personnel after the program has been implemented is also another measure that will help us evaluate if the program was successful. And then there are some potential challenges with any program. Of course, funding always creates a challenge. If we don't have proper funding, we're going to have limited staffing. Students also may be an issue getting participants to participate in the program because there's a stigma around mental illness and suicide. Therefore, students may be deterred from seeking help or wanting to participate. So we need to kind of create incentives to get children to participate in these programs, and also collecting the data and gathering all the results from the mental health professionals. Sometimes those things can be a slow process and can take a lot of time. So it's good if we can give incentives to school personnel and mental health staff to submit the feedback and questionnaires in a timely manner. Then I think that will definitely help with those challenges. So when we look at the logic model, we're looking at all the different contributing factors to it. So we're going to look at inputs, activities, outputs, short-term outcomes, medium outcome, and long-term outcomes. Inputs are what we invest in, so the funding, the screening, the workshops, the curriculum, the meeting space, the materials, the trainings, are all the things that we're investing in. And then what we do is the activities. So we're going to conduct workshops and trainings and meetings for school personnel and mental health counselors to be trained in suicide prevention. We're going to provide counseling training for counselors and community center personnel that deal with adolescent teens, bring community awareness of suicide prevention programs and services. We're going to also model help-seeking behaviors to students in school settings, bring suicide to the forefront of the media outlets by creating media campaigns, and we're going to begin implementation of activities to reduce the stigma associated with seeking help for suicide. The people that we're trying to reach are students, participants, staff, school personnel, clients, families, decision makers. And some of the goals that we would like to see short term is to increase help-seeking behaviors, change in attitudes towards the use of mental health services, and reduce discrimination against the uses of these services. Medium result or medium outcome would be a decrease in the number of hospitalized suicide attempts if we see a reduction in adolescents who partake in suicidal behaviors. And the long-term results is to see a percentage reduction in suicide rates among adolescent teen young girls. Also, to see an increase in students who report seeking help for depression or suicide. And definitely establishing a suicide prevention strategy that exists on a national level. This is a bibliography. Thank you for listening to my project. Hope you have a nice day.